Today, I'm joined by 1984 Galesburg High School graduate Greg Turner, truly one of the greatest running backs in the history of Silver Streaks football.
Ooh.
After making his mark at Galesburg, the highly recruited streak wound up at the University of Illinois, where he played in 2 college bowl games for the Fighting Illini. He graduated from the UOI with a degree in kinesiology. Inducted into the Galesburg Athletic Hall of Fame in 2010, Greg now lives in Shakopee, Minnesota, working as a sales director in sports apparel, and he's also coaching football, including his youngest son, Carson, who's a senior running back. So, Greg, thanks for joining me on WGIL.
Thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Yeah, great to have you. So let's go way back. Take me back to where your love for football first sparked. What were specific moments or who got you hooked as a kid going back to JFL maybe?
That's a real good question, Jay. I can and actually I have fond memories of JFL, and I think it was my older brother that actually got me into football and to try out, with JFL. And so I played for the Packers at that time, and the head coach was Jamie Bjorkman.
Okay, I know Jamie.
And
Yeah.
yeah. And so he really started to ingrain football in me. But the probably the most prominent moment in my football career that has followed me since was Dave Cox
Okay. I
was
know
an
Dave too.
assistant coach.
Yeah.
And I was having a hard time with the other players. I was young, 9 years old, and one of the bigger kids, but I just didn't have that mentality yet.
Mm-hmm.
And so the older kids were kind of dare I say showing me the ropes of the finer side of tackle football.
Uh-huh.
And Dave pulled me aside and he said, Greg, he said, football is a sport where you can hit somebody and not get in trouble. And for whatever the reason, the light went off in my head. And from that moment on, it was a great love for me, football. But I have to attribute that to Coach Bjorkman and Coach Cox. But Coach Cox really defined football for me. That really stuck with me.
So tell me if this story's true. I was talking to Carlos Interior, one of your former teammates. He said that at some point you weren't allowed to play JFL because you were so big. He said you were a man child back then.
Yeah. My last year, I think the weight limit was like 140, I think, to even play. And at that time, and I'm making sure I get my states, I've coached across the country. At that time, that was just to play and in JFL. It didn't matter if you were a skilled guy or not. A lot of states will break that weight down from just playing, or not just playing, but by skill.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you can carry the ball or not. And I think it was 140. And if I remember right, I had just come off of breaking my ankle and was ready to get back into it. And I think I weighed in at like 155 or something like that. And so I think Coach Bjorkman even petitioned. I would have been at Churchill at that time to see if I could play there, but they wouldn't let me. But
no go.
Carlos was right. I wasn't able to play my last year in JFL.
So you came up through Galesburg High School in the 80s. That was a time, and I was talking to Jerry Albright, one of your assistant coaches. The Silver Streaks had a machine for producing running backs back then. You had Gary Pugh, Phil Goodman, Bobby Jackson, yourself, Toby Davis. What's it like to be part of that era?
That was always something to live up to, and especially for me with, obviously with Gary. I even go back further, Dean McKillop.
Yeah.
Gary Pugh and
Mitchell. I think
Bill.
there was Mike. Yeah, Mitchell.
Yeah,
maybe.
we had a plethora of running backs at that time, and I think the offense spoke to it. We always had the size, that good old Midwestern environment there to grow the linemen. But I believe the offense and just the way in my era, Coach Kane, well, it was all of them. Coach Kane presented the offense to our opponents. We were pretty run oriented. We were physical. It was a great thing to be a running back at GHS at that time.
And, it was a case really where sometimes you didn't get as good as you didn't get a chance to shine until you were a senior, because you always had the guys, ahead of, behind you, I guess, they were always seniors.
Well, yeah. And so, I didn't get the opportunity to play up, if you will.
That's what kind of what I was referring
Yeah,
to.
yeah. And Coach Kane was really good at letting me know, and a tribute to him, always paying tribute to the guys that have stuck in the programs. And he really believed in playing, the upperclassmen that again, had represented his program through the years. But he never let me doubt, that I wasn't capable. But in the same context, he was strong in his programs and in his beliefs that, the guys that have stuck with the program and obviously had the skill set and skill level, he made sure that they participated, in at the level and at the, dare I say, the amount that they should.
Mm-hmm. Were you one as a kid that went out and watched the Silver Streaks growing up?
Yeah, back then there was always, in the old configuration of the field and the stands, on that visitor side, there was always that big opening there.
Yeah.
And of course we were back there playing whatever type of football we could get.
Right.
So yeah, I would start out watching the game, but
Yeah.
sooner we were mimicking what we were seeing on the field over there.
Yeah. Who were some of the guys you looked up to?
Well, again, there was Gary Pugh and Phil. I can remember Jeff Flater, Stu Pyatt. There were a lot of guys that really kind of gave some example on, what I learned later is just how to compete. And there, you didn't have to be, a loud and a rah-rah guy or anything like that, but every play you gave what you had,
Mm-hmm.
and get right back to the huddle and start it over again. So, I can remember Kurt Bell pulling me aside a couple times and kind of, giving me some insight into what's happening out there on the field and how to carry myself and how to perform. But, for the most part, the coaches were really, I had some really good coaches in Galesburg, and I'll never be able to repay that.
Yeah. Speaking of coaches, you mentioned a couple times you played for the legendary Kelly Kane, and can you share what made him such a special coach? I know you've talked about his X's and O's, but it's his competitive spirit that you've kind of credited with shaping your entire life.
Exactly, and for me, that Southern Illinois where Coach Kane came from, and every once in a while that draw would come
Yeah.
out. But he. From my mentality, he was just an extension of how I was raised and what I was getting at home. And I think it stuck because here was somebody that wasn't related to me, but yet the language he was speaking and the respect that he commanded, it wasn't anything new to me. I was raised with that, so it flowed right in. But then again, he still gave you the freedom to be the athlete that you were, and he didn't put a lot of guidelines on what you did, but he did have a lot on how you did it.
Yeah.
And as long as you stayed inside those parameters, it was a great thing.
Yeah. Talk about him as a X's and O's guy.
If you've ever had a chance to speak to him, highly intelligent guy, and very football savvy. Understood the game, both offense and defense, and being able to predict, from a strategy standpoint, being able to understand the flow of the game, and then laying in whatever type of plays that were needed. I think he had a real strong understanding of the personnel that we had.
Mm-hmm.
But again, inside of that offense and the confines of running a play at a certain hole, at a certain space, at a certain time, he still gave the freedom to be creative, and a lot of times, especially at the running back position, it's a feel, and some people call it vision, but as running back and most running backs I speak to, it's a feel, and he was a big proponent of letting you play in that field. And that, to me, that was something that carried me, just being able to get on the field and not be robotic, even in the confines of a specific play. He still allowed that freedom. But I think his intelligence and understanding the flow of the game and what to call and when to call it, I think speak for itself.
Back when we're in high school, I don't know if we realize coaches on how good they are, or maybe even how bad they are. But did you realize at the time that he was kind of in another level?
Probably for me, my freshman year at Illinois, and how prepared I was to understand football, and even at that level, and at that time, Coach Mike White, was really kind of bringing in what is now the West Coast offense. But, back then, and run and shoot, or whatever you want to call it, the West Coast, he was in that group of coaches, Vermeil, and there was a few other ones that really started throwing the ball, and so understanding defenses, understanding football, and the differences, and how linemen can change, and how the different formations will dictate a play, even though it's written up one way, but because of a defensive alignment, it's going to change. I know for a fact that allowed me to get on the field sooner, just simply how prepared I was, and that's stemming from Coach Kane.
Okay. This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to former Galesburg and University of Illinois football star Greg Turner. So let's talk about your streaks career a little bit. You went 6-3 as a junior, and then actually 7-3, and you had that playoff loss to Richwoods as a senior. How do you reflect on the year? I know you had some injury problems that year, right?
Yeah, my senior year was tough for me because I got hurt. I think it was that second game or so, and that was a really growing process for me mentally. And I just wasn't able to contribute to the team. I thought we at that point in time, with the players we had, James Johnson, myself, Steve Batzer, really strong linemen across the line of scrimmage. I thought we had a real good chance to really get after state and even get up, get into it a little deeper than what we did. But that's
what was the injury?
Ankle.
Yeah, that ankle's kind of bothered you your whole life.
It did. It did, and that was the same ankle I broke it when I was in JFL, and so it was that same one. And I've had a slew of doctors look at it, and they all say, Greg, there's nothing there outside of just that coincidence, I guess, if you can put it that way.
Yeah. So how much did you get to play the rest of the year?
I came back off and on, but definitely nowhere near, what I was.
Yeah.
But I had a few plays I would contribute, and then something, would happen, and I'm limping back to the sidelines. So
yeah, that's pretty tough to deal with as a high school kid, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially
when you're supposed to be the guy, it's kind of tough to.
Yeah, and if I'm getting into myself here, and please forgive me, but I worked pretty hard that off season.
Yeah.
To really get after it, and I had some college coaches whispering in my ear, and some of the older guys, and I spent a considerable amount of time in the weight room and on the track, getting prepared. So yeah, it was a tough one for me.
Yeah. So that season, I think you actually beat Richwoods, right, during the regular season, and then you lost
the regular season,
and you lost to him in the playoffs. What do you remember about that playoff game?
just the fact that they came really prepared for us, and I was hearing a little chirping on the sidelines, 33 this, 33 that, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that. Yeah, I still remember that to this day.
Yeah. I
It's
mean,
crazy through the years.
Richwoods is no slouch. I mean, they're always a perennial power. So at least
Yeah,
they
but I
were
mean,
back then.
that regular season game, we thumped them pretty good. If I say so myself, I think I got the player of the week, just to say a
Hmm.
little bit. But anyway,
So,
area player of the week, if I remember correctly. But
yep, yeah. Again, talking to Carlos, there's a lot of stuff that goes into being a football player and a team off the field too. And he said he remembers trips that you guys took to Pizza Hut, you and Jim Adams, Craig Stewart, James Johnson, and what are your memories about just times off the field?
the teenage kids in high school, right?
Yeah.
And we fought all the things that we weren't supposed to do, and we fought all the things that you were supposed to do. Um, the camaraderie that we had, which I think really showed on the football field, and I know at that time I had a pretty strong relationship with James Johnson, our quarterback, and even to how it carried off on the field, even in the track. And you mentioned Coach Albright.
Hmm.
James and I grew up together, and we kind of had a strong feel for each other. And I knew, in our offense, if he was pitching or if he was running, and he knew. And if you can look back at some of the film, and he was pitching the ball, didn't look. He just pitched it.
He's
And
kind of an underrated guy, isn't he, in Silver Streak?
very athletic, and again, inside of Coach Kane's offense was built for it. Where that, and you see it a lot now in a lot of the different offenses now, especially at the high school level, the different wing tees and the different running formations. And if you don't have a quarterback that's a threat, those offenses don't really shine like they can,
Yeah.
even with the misdirection. But if your quarterback is a threat, it really opens up that offense, and it's tough for defense to defend, because at any one point in time there's three options on every play, and now they hide it behind the RPOs, run pass options, and different things. But at its core, it's still the same, And but yeah, he really gave another aspect to the offense, which helped me,
Hmm.
and because you had to defend both of us at any one point in time. You had to account for us, and just the way the offense ran, you couldn't. You know,
Yeah.
when we were clicking, it was a beautiful thing.
I know you were pretty heavily recruited, again, going back to your sophomore year. How much did that injury your senior year impact your recruiting situation?
You can take it by levels. Obviously, D1, it really hurt, and with the amount of guys they're reaching out to and the amount of options that they have at that level, they're not going to give a second thought and going to a different player.
Hmm.
So at the D1 level, it really a lot of guys I had in Nebraska and Iowa, Iowa State, those guys backed off pretty quick. Just again, nothing against them.
Yeah.
They have the options, and then at that time it was Division I AA, and now it is BCF, Football Championship Series, BCS, yeah, Football Championship Series. But we called it 1AA
Hmm.
back in the 80s. And so had a strong slew of them from Northern Illinois to Iowa or Illinois State. Were probably the two biggest ones that I remember really coming after me.
Okay. So then how did you end up going to Illinois and playing for Mike White?
Um, obviously it was Illinois, but really sold me on. They really wanted a strong running game. They needed some bigger backs. I think the aspect of being didn't come with a lot of the accolades that, you know, I remember my recruiting trip there. You know, there was this player, that player, he was all this, he was all that, and he's from St. Louis and he's from Chicago, and you know, and I tell them where I'm from, Galesburg. Well, where's that
Yeah.
at? You know, and I think the competitive nature in me, they kind of, dare I say, disrespected me,
Uh-huh.
but you know, like I couldn't play or couldn't perform.
Right.
So you know, with the school itself, and you know, the chance to get a degree from that school, it was pretty evident. I mean, it would have went there.
This is Jay Redfern. I'm talking to former Galesburg Silver Streak and University of Illinois football player Greg Turner. I know we've talked to you before, and you called Mike White, you know, a brilliant offensive mind. How did his coaching style build on what you learned from Coach Kane? You kind of talked about that a little bit.
Again, I mean, you look at the history of football, especially in the Big Ten. Mike White really changed the whole concept. You know, at that time, the reputation of the Big Ten was, you know, run and, you know, student body right, student body left in a cloud of dust. But all of a sudden, you know, Mike White comes in, and we're throwing 4 downs in a row. We throw on 1st and 10. We throw on 4th and 1. You know, so he really brought that type of imagination to the game. But, you know, very pro style, very pro oriented coach, you know. And back then we called it if then. So each play, you know, it was if your defender does this, and you're going to do that. So
Mhm.
really, you each play was two or three plays in itself, depending on what position you were. And I lettered my freshman year there, after my redshirt year. My first letter came at X, a wide receiver. You know, I got more reps there. Just and again, back to Coach Kane and understanding football, because I picked up the system pretty well, to the point where I was playing basically 3 positions. I could play 3 positions inside of his offense.
Yeah. Who would the
Um,
quarterback have been at that time?
uh, Jack Trudeau was probably the most prominent one. I had Jack, I had Kenny Cruz, um, Jack Minkhausen, and obviously probably the biggest one is Jeff George.
Hmm.
But Jack Trudeau and Jeff George are probably the 2 that stand out the most. You know, from a quarterback position inside of Coach Kane, or excuse me, Coach White's offense.
Yeah. You knew how to do it, but how hard is that adjusting to somebody that's like going on to be a pro quarterback with an arm like that?
You know, um,
I mean,
it was almost too
the first time they're throwing to you, it's got to be feel a little different, right?
well. You know, and again, some insight to it. Jack was just he had a big, strong arm, but a different motion, and you could really feel the rotation on the ball. But Jeff Jeff George, I got to take a moment and pause. I mean, whew, I just remember, you know, he came to practice and he had to sit out a year. I think he transferred over from Indiana, I believe, or some school. But anyway, and you know, we had Craig Swope, David Edwards, Ayers. We had 3 or 4 all Big Ten DBs back there, and so, you know, they'd come to practice even in team time. You know, face mask on snaps, mouthpiece hanging out, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden Jeff steps out there and he starts slinging the ball. The next thing you know, these guys are in their stance and they got their mouthpiece in. But the probably the thing that follows Jeff George is he had the softest ball.
Hmm.
It was so easy to catch. And I don't care if it was 10 yards or 60 yards. And I'll go down seeing, I kind of helped him on one of his pro days, and he was, I think there was quite a few coaches there, but I just remember one play he was backpedaling, and I think it was Daryl Usher, legitimate, I think electronic time, 4-2 something, 4-3. broke free, and off his back foot, Jeff hit him on a dime about 60 yards. And I remember a few of the pro scouts just packing up and leaving. And I in my mind, um, arguably I think he was projected middle first round, late first round. On that one throw, he went from middle, late first round to number one on just that one throw.
Okay.
He was something else.
Yeah. After football, you dove into the sports apparel world, and you spent nearly 19 years with Nike. How did your background guide you into that kind of career?
Um, my junior and senior year really started. I was basically coach on the field, actually. And I was running our meetings. Our position coach would leave on Tuesdays and go recruit, and I would basically run our meetings. And so
Mhm.
um, my degrees in kinesiology within mine, my professors were pushing me pretty hard to go into teaching and thus coaching. And that was kind of the direction I started off with. But then one of my kines professors that we were doing some research, and actually for Nike and the footwear companies at the time, he said, Greg, you might want to look at this. This kind of fits your kind of fits your personality and kind of fits on what you're doing. So, I kind of started looking at that and really changed my curriculum on the fly to incorporate, a lot more business. So my minor's in business, but it really flowed right into football and being around the athletics, but being able to give some insight into the product itself on feel and comfort and the different characteristics that you need. I was able to speak to.
Boy, that's come a long way, hasn't it? I mean, we're pretty close to the same age, and leather shoes weren't that around that long by the time you were in high school, right? I mean, we just got those back when we were in junior high. So I mean, the
Hmm.
whole apparel and shoes and everything has just come so far, right?
Yeah, it is crazy the things, the different polyesters and the different synthetic fabrics now. And it's even continuing to evolve. And the whole goal of the manufacturing companies, Nike, Under Armour, Adidas, whomever, is we used to say in some of the design rooms is the best feel is no feel.
Hmm.
And that's a lot of the goal, especially the guys in Beaverton, Nike. That's still one of the design mantras is it the comfort is almost like you're not wearing anything,
Yeah.
and that's what they're striving to get. But yeah, the chemistry behind the different fabrics is just unreal. What's
You
happening
mentioned,
now?
yeah, you mentioned you've coached before, but you're back coaching again. You're coaching some high school and youth football up there in Minnesota. What's that experience been like? And what kind of lessons are you trying to teach your son, who's a senior running back this year?
Um, again, from my coaching and a lot of what my coaching style, if you will, and that stems from as far back as the Morgans, Coach Bob and Coach Bill and
Hmm.
Coach O'Malley and Coach Allison. All of them had different personalities. All of them had different demeanors, and so I have defined it through the years as just the ability to communicate. And each kid is different. Each player is different. They hear, they see differently. And so as a coach, it is your job, or at least the way I feel, it is my job to find out just what language that player is speaking in and listening in, and that's my job to communicate what I need, what I'm trying to do, whatever the the goal is from a football perspective. It is my job to make sure that I'm communicating that way. But as my sons will say, Reese and Carson, I'm a little old school, very old school,
Yeah.
and so I come a little differently than what the coaches are now. And in my mind, I try to reflect the game, and the game is relentless. The game is doesn't care about your excuses. You either get the play done, you execute your technique at your best effort, or you don't.
I'm glad you
And
mentioned the assistant coaches or the sophomores. Mr. O'Malley and the Allisons and all, Mr. Albright and all the assistant coaches. I mean, those guys are just as, the Kelly Canes get the attention, and they get the wins and losses, but those other guys are so important. And back when we were in school, those guys were so good. It was kind of a golden age for coaches, I thought.
yeah, I mean, like again, I go far back, and I again from Coach Bjorkman to Coach Cox, and again I'll pick on the Morgans because Coach Bob really gave me a strong foundation on what my coaching philosophy, what my coaching style is, and I remember coming back, from college, and Coach Bob would always have the gym open on Saturdays,
Hmm.
and we all showed up, and when we were there playing for him, all the older
Exactly.
guys would come in on Saturdays and play. You know this,
Yeah.
and I came to play one time, and there was one of his players, and I didn't want to hurt him,
Yeah.
but I was supposed to go up and get the rebound strong, and I kind of eased off. Coach Bob laid into me like I was one of his players.
Yeah.
I don't care. I don't care that you got a full ride at
Yeah.
University of Illinois. If you're in this gym, you can. Yes, sir.
Yeah. I can
That's
see that happening for sure.
but I think Coach Bob and Coach Kane, the one thing they said to me, was just simply give it back. Give it back what you gained, what you learned. That was their simple message to me, was just give it back. And that's what I've tried to do since, is just give it back.
Yeah. Giving back, as a Galesburg Athletic Hall of Famer and, one of the greatest running backs, what message or advice would you give to the current Galesburg players looking to carry on the game and the legacy?
I think probably the number one thing I learned and I preached, and not to get too philosophical, but and I've had the fortune to opportunities to speak, and probably the one message that I give is, however it is that you see yourself playing, however it is that you see yourself performing as a player. And the beauty of this, side note, you can take this off the field, but however that vision of yourself playing, you must practice that exact same way,
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
because every play, and you won't know until it's taken away from you. Every play can be your last, especially in football,
Right.
and you don't know, and you're not, and as in life. And again, I'll try and keep it, don't want to get too big here, Jay, but you're not promised that next play,
Yeah. Right.
you know so I think that's probably the one thing I try to instill, is you have to practice exactly how you want to play. And when you get scared, when you get tired, when the guy is your opponent is better than you, if you will, or what have you, your body's going to do exactly what you've trained it to do. You know, and if there's one thing that you can do, is practice that way, the game becomes a lot different, a lot more enjoyable if you
Yeah.
can incorporate that.
Yeah. That's a great message. So, we're going to finish with a rapid fire round. I'm going to say something. You give me your first thought. Okay. So how about, you mentioned James Johnson, but how about underrated Galesburg teammate?
Craig Stewart.
Okay. Good
Um,
athlete. Yeah.
yeah,
Great athlete.
very, very good athlete. I've always said Craig Stewart was probably the best athlete in our class.
Yeah. Another
And
guy that
that's
kind of goes unranked a little bit.
um well, Batcher was there, Joe Droke, um, um, Pat Huffaker, Joe Dennis.
Yeah.
Uh,
Joe. Yeah.
Definitely Joe Dennis. He should have came out earlier. But some of those guys really, I thought, really rounded out our team. Jim Adams, we mentioned before.
Right.
But yeah, we had some good guys there.
Okay. How about the best athlete you ever competed against?
Ooh. High school
Any
or
level.
any level? Hmm. Man, we had from Pepper Johnson to Lorenzo White to defensively, Pepper Johnson, um, Jeff George, Keith Jones, Howard Griffith. Man, I've had the luxury of seeing some really talented people. Craig Swope, probably, but the best pure athlete defining movement was Marlon Primos he was a DB for us from LA, and his movement was just something different.
Okay.
Something different.
How about the favorite all-time venue that you played at?
Whew. You know, it's got to come down to Ohio State or Michigan. Back in those days, Ohio
Yeah.
State had that big dome. You remember the old turf
Uh-huh.
fields? They
Yeah.
had that big crown.
Yeah.
But the atmosphere there was second to none. And then Michigan, just because it was so big and the stands, you only had from the sideline of the field to the beginning of the stands, really was maybe 10 yards.
Uh-huh.
And you were packed in there. But when you looked out into the stands, you didn't realize that, it was 100,000+ people there.
Yeah.
And the fans were really nice. Ohio State, they weren't, but the atmosphere and the energy at Ohio State is something to behold.
Okay. How about the team you love to beat, both high school and college?
High school, any of the Western Big Six teams
Yeah.
at that time. I think Rocky had a special flavor to them because they were just so athletic.
Yeah.
Moline was Moline, so
Yeah.
especially there, I can't. Was that Wharton? Well, not what was the field? I can't think of the field. I can
Browning
see it.
Field. Yeah.
Browning
Field.
Field,
Yeah.
because Whitey's was right at the corner. I do remember
Exactly. Yeah.
that.
Right around the corner. Yeah.
So yeah, those guys, we had just started playing the Peoria teams later. Probably the one team that still crawls with me that we never beat was Geneseo.
Yeah.
At that time.
Yeah.
At that time, that was always the one game I revved up to play.
Yeah.
I wanted a piece of them. College, again, Ohio State, Michigan. The most physical one, whether it be legal and illegal, was Michigan State.
Okay.
But there was a few incidences in the tunnel going in for halftime that was that stand out.
Yeah. Okay. How about after a loss, who has the toughest practice, Coach Kane or Coach White?
Coach White. Coach White.
Yeah.
I remember a couple games. I think Iowa, they put it to us, and we got off the bus coming from the game, and get dressed. We're going to the field.
Oh, wow. Those are tough ones, aren't they?
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. And
Yeah.
Al Martindale was the trainer, and he was raising the fit, but Coach White wasn't having it.
Yeah. How about favorite Galesburg restaurant, past or present?
Ooh. I grew up on the South Side, so Taco Hideout will always be that one.
Yeah, that's what Jared
Hammer's
said.
Pizza. Happy Joe's at that time.
Yeah.
And obviously McDonald's. In our community, and but yeah, there was always some pretty good places to eat there.
Yeah. Finally, Galesburg. What does Galesburg mean to you?
Home. You can scrape it off, and I've been fortunate to live in some of the major cities here and visit them, but nothing feels like home, and as much as Galesburg doesn't have, obviously compared to other cities that I have, it is still that feeling of home, and that's as simple as I can say it, and that's as strong as I can say it. Is home.
Okay. That wraps up my conversation with Greg Turner. Greg, you truly are one of the very best players that I've ever seen come through Galesburg, and it was a real thrill catching up with you today. So thanks for joining me on WGIL.
And Jay, thank you for having me. I appreciate your persistence when my schedule gets crazy. I greatly appreciate that, and thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're most welcome. You're at the top of my list, so I'm glad I can cross that one off. So,
Yes, sir. Thank you again.
okay. Okay.
Take care of yourself, sir.